This is APCS video number 3, talking about printing things out to the console window. So in the last video, we ended with this Hello World program. So you should open up your Hello World program, and if by chance you didn't save it or don't have it with you, you can stop the video here and type it out again. It'd be good practice. So I want to show you the importance of two little letters, and the importance of the two little letters are this LN at the end of this print. You can see it says print and then there's an LN, and this is a method. We've talked a little bit in the previous video about the idea of a method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this whole line. Control C is copy. You should get to kind of know this keyboard shortcuts. Go to the end of this line, I'm going to hit enter to give me a new line. Now Control V to paste it. And let's just run it just as is. So when I run it, you can see I get hello world. Probably not very surprising or interesting here. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to my method here, this println, or I like to call it println, and I'm going to delete the two letters, the ln. I can keep them in the second one. It's not going to much matter. We'll talk about really the difference between keeping it in the first one and taking it out in the second one and so forth. And now I'm going to run it again. And you can see there's a difference. Now what it does is it prints out hello world all in the same line. Now that's kind of significant. Formatting is somewhat important. You need to understand the formatting and what each of these things does. So that LN turns out that it's actually what we used to call in the old days a carriage return. Because on a typewriter in the old days, when you're at the end of a line, there was this lever that you would hit, and it would actually take and move the typewriter to the beginning of the next line. That was called a carriage return. And so that LN acts as a carriage return. It takes the computer and it puts it in, starts so that it types out on the next line. Now, a couple of things with formatting you also notice is that without the LN, and when it puts these two words on the same line, there's no space. Let's say, for example, I wanted them on the same line, but of course I probably want to format them so there's a space in between or something else. You'd have to either add the space inside the quotes here to the end of the first one, and it would clearly work. And it has to be inside the quotes. The space is a character like any other character, or I could put it at the beginning of the next one. It wouldn't matter. You can see the same kind of result. Now, each line itself that you're typing out, that you add, either include the LN or you don't include the LN. So you might say, well, what's the difference? What happens if I take out the LN here? You wouldn't notice anything, but basically the cursor would be at the very end of this second line waiting for when you go to type out the next thing. It would just keep it on the same line and so forth. So that's the first thing we want to talk about. The next thing I want to talk about is really what things can you print out. Now, so here we'll put the LN back so that we have on a separate line. So clearly I can print out some text, and anything I want to put, we call this a string, and it's what we call a string literal, because literally what you see is what you get. So anything in quotes, you're really getting exactly what you type out in those quotes. Now it's very important you put quotes, because for example, if I take out those quotes, first of all, you're going to see an error, and there's really two things wrong with this now, and maybe I mentioned this a little bit in the previous video. The first thing is that without those quotes, what it's actually looking to try to do is it's trying to figure out what this hello world is, and what it's kind of thinking it is a variable. But the one thing that we'll talk about with variable names is you can't have spaces. So really, in some sense, it's thinking that hello is a variable and world is a variable, but then also your syntax is incorrect because there's the space that isn't allowed. If I took out the space, now it's really just looking for a hello world variable. Matter of fact, if I go to the little X, it's probably going to tell me hello world can't be resolved as a variable. So keep in mind that when you put quotes around it, it becomes, as I said, what we call a string literal. Now my X goes away and I don't have space in there, but now it's really just going to print out hello world as is. Literally what you see is what you get. So what else things can I print out? Well, clearly I might be able to print out variables based on kind of our discussion we just had, but I can also print out numbers. So I can print out, say, an 8. I can even do arithmetic here. I can say I'm going to print out 8 plus 3, and it'll actually do the arithmetic and print out 11. And it does order operations here. I can go times 2, and you can think about the order of operations here that, you know, you expect it to do multiplication first, so that 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 8 is 14, and indeed, Java is pretty smart. It'll do order operations, so you can use it as kind of a calculator and do things like that. We can print out variables. Now, we haven't really talked about what a variable is, but here, and you'll have to kind of, we'll get a little bit ahead of ourselves here for 1 second, and we'll create a variable, and let's create an integer. And so we'll talk a little bit more in the next video about creating a variable and so forth. So for now, just kind of a leap of faith here and type out what I have here. So I can go int, and here we'll call it hello world. And we'll see by convention that variables should have lowercase, begin with lowercase letters and be in this camel case that we talked about earlier. So we'll call hello world, and we'll say this equals 8. So there's a complete line in Java. You can see I don't have any X's here. Now, I do get this little warning here, and the warning is literally, it's not an error, but it's just saying, hey, you created this variable, but it was kind of silly because it's not actually used. So Eclipse does some things that some other IDEs don't do, but here we're going to use it. We're going to print out hello world. Now be very careful because Java is very sensitive to capitalization. So sometimes people create a variable called hello world and use a lowercase here and an uppercase here, and you can see what's going to happen is now it's going to give me an error because it doesn't know what this hello world is, because capitalization is very important. So be very careful of that. And now you can see it'll print out kind of what I had before. So we can actually create variables and print those out just as if I wanted to print out the number 8. Now, sometimes we might want to do something like this. We're going to take the element off. We know what that does. And we might be writing a program where we would say answer is, and then we can have it do some arithmetic here, and we can say 8 plus 3 or something like that. Now, I purposely did what I did here because I wanted to, again, prove a point, get you thinking about this formatting. So think about what's going to happen when I print this out. So I took the ln off, so we know it's going to print out one line. But formatting issue, I don't have a space here. So normally we'd put a space here, and now I can kind of print out nicely. But the other thing I can actually do is I can actually kind of concatenate these two strings together. I can put them all in one print statement. So there's really no need to have two separate print statements here. So let me show you what I mean by that. I can go plus, and then I can go 11. And I'm going to actually take this line out and show you what happens. It prints out answer is 11. So this addition sign, when you're talking about something being a string literal, this is kind of important. This is getting a little technical for the first time. So when something is a string literal, it's in quotes, and so Java knows it's a string. When you go to add two strings together, automatically what Java does is converts both of them to strings. So this 11, which is a number, gets actually converted to essentially a string. In other words, exactly like this. Now, that's not the number 11. I can't do arithmetic on this thing. This is literally the string literal. What you see is what you get. It's just the two characters, a 1 and a 1. So Java makes this conversion automatically, and it creates this string. And so you can see right now you wouldn't notice any difference. But let me show you something that here, if I said, okay, answer is 8 plus 3, notice what it's going to print out. It's going to print out answer is 8 plus 3, because what you see is what you get. It's a string literal. Now, what if I took off these quotes? And now I printed it out. So now these are numbers again. You can see that they didn't turn blue. They're not strings. Now, this is a very important point about order operations and what's really happening internally. And so I want to run this and think about what you would expect it to print out. And so I'm going to run it, and you can say answer is 83. So here's what's happening, is that, remember we just got done saying that when you add two strings together in Java, Java convert, or excuse me, when you add a string to anything else, that's what I should have said. Java creates the other thing to a string and then adds it up. So what's happening is in the first step, what's happening is Java is essentially saying, okay, I got a string and I'm adding to it an 8 because order of operations is going to left to right, it's going to do the first addition. And what it does is literally, now I'm going to erase this in a second here, but it literally makes this 8 the string 8 because it's adding a string to something else, so it makes them both strings, adds them up, and so that's literally the new string is answer is 8. It concatenates those strings, and then it goes to take that new string, answer is 8, and it adds the 3, which in order to do that, it must make the 3 a string, so it essentially makes that a string, and that's how you get the answer is 83. So first question would be, okay, what if I wanted it to print out answer is 11? I wanted it to do the arithmetic. So now, it wouldn't really be a problem if you did times, because order of operations is going to do multiplication before addition, and even though this is an addition that's a little unique, it's actually string concatenation, it's still addition, and so it would actually do the proper operation. So this is starting to get us to think a little bit about order of operations. If I wanted to make it do the 8 plus 3, I would need some parentheses. I'd have to have it do it first, and so now when it's actually adding the 8 plus 3, it's actually going to do this integer arithmetic and make it 11, and then it'll do the string concatenation. So just like in normal order of operations, if you want to change the order, you would actually use some parentheses. So that was kind of a lot to take in for our third video here about strings. Hopefully you can kind of mess around and work on formatting and look at the different kinds of things you can print. Our video number 4 will actually talk a little bit more about strings and something called escape characters.